First of all, I would like to address a few things before class. Mainly, it is about the studying, contemplation, and practice, as well as observing precepts and propagating the Dharma and benefiting beings. I think all of the stated above, we're preserving all of them really well. There are a few things, however, we need to pay attention to. And first of all, it is that throughout this period of time where it's rather very special, you're probably quite aware of it. So let it be phone calls or sending messages on WeChats or retweeting or reposting. Make sure whatever you're doing is appropriate. It is in accordance with the law. Otherwise, it could bring various impact that is not particularly favorable. In my opinion, I think as practitioners it would be the best to, first of all, either engage in solitary retreat in caves. In this way, you won't be disturbed by the others, nor disturbing the others. Another great way of being a practitioner is that to comply with the changes, or at least to understand the changes that's happening around the society, the world, or the country that you stay in. You have to be aware of your circumstances. Do not be a person only live in a bag or in your own sphere and do not understand what kind of circumstances you stay in. As a practitioner, wherever you are, though we don't have to comply with the worldly dharmas, just as how Mipa Rinpoche taught. However, we do need to understand what's going on in the world. The balance of such would be beneficial to your own practice as well as benefiting the other beings. On top of that, people inside Larungar, you do need to be vigilant. On one hand, I do see people tend to be on the extreme of being too cowardice. And sometimes I feel that you're a little too frivolous, get too arrogant. And that's the other extreme. Whatever you're doing, you need to be very aware of the circumstances of your living environment. You have to know the condition. You have to be very much aware of it. Otherwise, you'll be rather quite blindsided. I'm addressing this is because recently I see it is because I've noticed how lots of our practitioners started to have lots of gatherings and started talking out, started to talk and chant with very loud voices. I can hear those kinds of voices from quite far even. But this group of people, I think, tend to be the group of people who would run away whenever there is anything that's happening. People don't want to take responsibilities but tend to create tend to create lots of rather difficulties. Recently, you may feel that it's getting a little better, but it is because I've put lots of effort to temporarily put a pause onto certain adverse situations, but it is not eradicating those adverse situations at all. In various situations, in fact, various situations over here still have to be under control. Let it be the number of people attending classes over here in Shuan Hall, or in terms of the voice or noise levels. I hope the Khenpos and Khenmos can work with me, rather than there are people who tend to remember what I brought forth, and there are the ones who only remember it for a few days and then forget about it after 2 days. So I'd like to then address this again. I'm not saying that you have to be so skittish about your actions and being very or too timid in some ways. However, you don't need to be too arrogant about your current situation either. Don't be too frivolous, because there are still lots of things that need to be handled, and I still have lots of responsibility and pressure. In fact, many of the Khenpos and Khenmos and lots of practitioners are being very vigilant still and cautious with their actions. There are probably just a few of them, a few of the practitioners whom are not aware of the situation and are creating adversities unnecessarily. Whatever you do, you need to be appropriate according to the current situation and the society and all of those regulations. As a practitioner, you definitely need to be more watchful and cautious. You have to be aware of the situations in general as a society and as a community. So this is my before class announcement. The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons, and now see it here to receive it and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, less generate supreme bodhicitta.
Gunru lamdang sangstan soga nyomong chima metak dang energy se chamba dang lai mugdang jivat kimbi tomnar namba je nedang nemen nanmen kamdang jowi muba na tsodang nyomong namshang wangbu tsodang energy se chamba dang lai mugdang zagba zatsir mishi kochi zigba dang shangnam bugdang njigdang chobshir topgang yinba dorji vjin.
Let us now continue with the Uttaratantra Shastra. We will have this class, the Uttaratantra Shastra today and tomorrow. Uttaratantra Shastra, currently we are already on chapter 3, the 6th Vajra point on qualities. And in this chapter, we mainly are studying the various qualities and merits of the Buddha. There are the 32 types of qualities that is to benefiting him or self-benefiting, and then 32 that's benefiting the others. Those are the ripening fruition. In terms of the fruition that that transcends all kinds of elaborations. So let us study this with great detail. I'm sure many people have already studied the various merits or have at least heard about the term of the 10 powers for fearlessness and 18 unmixed qualities, and people heard about those. And whenever we talk about the Buddha, we then discuss the Buddha's qualities in such a way, and we use this term very often. However, people only sometimes understand it only on its literal level, but do not understand more in detail. There are people whom, for example, only can mimic the words but do not understand its profound meanings. The group of people whom understand the profundity of the qualities of the Buddha are indeed very few. In fact, out of each of the teachings, there are the profound reasons behind it. And whatever we study, we have to combine with the reasoning as well as the actual teaching together. In this way, you will be able to generate a deep understanding. And we also have to understand the way of studying certain texts. If you understand the particular method of studying this text, then it will be easy for you to look for commentaries and cross-reference with other books and so on and so forth. And it will be easier for you to generate understanding. After generating such understanding, you would be able to see, oh, this is how the Buddha is. And then you would generate the view of certainty. So while we're studying, while we're contemplating, engaging in this whole process, we have to understand the theoretical aspect of it, the reasoning aspect of it. For example, the 64 root afflictions of Abhidharma, and what are the various jargons and terms mean in the Buddhist context, and how we can explain them in a worldly language that would be easier to be understood. I think all of those aspects are very important. Whenever we talk about the humanistic Buddhism, in fact, we're talking about how to expound the profound meanings within Buddhism to the worldly beings in a straightforward fashion. Of course, whenever we look at the humanistic Buddhists or humanistic masters, the Buddhist masters who propagated humanistic Buddhism, sometimes they would use very simple language to expound the profound Dharma teachings. On the other hand, we see that if you were to propagate the humanistic Buddhism in the world, but without a profound level of understanding the Dharma, then it would be difficult for you to expound the full profundity of the Dharma. Rather, you can only speak of the very shallow level and only get a little scratch of the Dharma to the sentient beings. So we have to find a balance between the complete secular approach of the Dharma and the religious aspect and the profound aspect of the Dharma as well. If we were to only delve into the secular extreme and speak of the very simple teachings from the Dharma, then you are really not teaching the Dharma, rather it could be destructive to the Dharma. So it's essential to be able to use the simple language. On the other hand, it is essential to expound the Dharma to its full profundity as well. We've engaged in various kinds of debate in the past where we talked about how to present the Dharma in front of sentient beings and how to propagate the Dharma to the sentient beings, to the worldly beings. According to the lofty masters of the past, what they would state is that they would give teachings to only a small group of numbers of people with the language of the Dharma, only to the group of a small group of beings who already acquired the, for example, faith and all kinds of merits and all kinds of causes and conditions and all kinds of aspirations. Of course, it would be wonderful to have such disciples and more disciples like that. But on the other hand, I think as the propagator of the Dharma, we have to adapt to the world in terms of our language, in terms of the way of thinking as well, so that we can achieve a successful propagation or a successful career in propagation of the Dharma. Now over here we're looking at the 10 powers of the Buddha. First of all, we're looking at the 10 powers and depiction of the essence of the 10 powers, and then the examples as the meaning of the 10 powers or as the demonstrations. Knowing what is worthwhile and worthless, knowing the ripening product of all actions, knowing faculties, temperaments, and wishes, knowing the path, reaching the entire range, knowing meditative stability, and so on when it's afflicted or without pollution, memory of the past states, divine sight and peace, and the 10 aspects of the power of the knowledge. Over here, this kind of power are the power of knowledge. It is not the power mainly based on physical strength or anything else. Rather, it is the power of the knowledge or of wisdom. In fact, whenever we talk about the power, there are innumerable numbers of powers that's acquired by the Buddha. That's the quality of the Buddha. However, over here, we're talking about the 10 categories or the 10 main aspects of the power of the Buddha. According to the Madhyamika Avatara, where it says that through the skillful means or through skillfully making the choices, the Buddha has acquired the 10 types of power. Through the wondrous, subtle, and certain way, then the Buddha came to this the 10 points or the 10 aspects of the powers. As mundane beings, we all seek for wisdom. This is something that we all long for and pursue after. But the mundane beings somehow, at the beginning, maybe they would feel that this is the wisdom and then they would follow. But after a while, because such wisdom is not considered as the supreme wisdom, it is not the kind of wisdom that would be long-lasting. Therefore, with the time passing, such kind of wisdom would be left behind, and people would not recognize or would not engage in the people would not then uptake such kind of wisdom anymore. So each of the 10 powers are also explained in the Madhyamikavatara, but we're not going to explain it in accordance to the teachings in Madhyamikavatara. So let's look at each of the verses that's in correspondence to its explanation. Now, first of all, knowing what is worthwhile and worthless. Why is that? First of all, in the commentary, it explains that during the pastime of the Buddha was still practicing on the path of learning, because he had made the steadfast vow of practicing upon the Madhyamika, upon the the Mahayana Dharma, and finally he came to the kind of understanding of relying upon the two types of birth as well as the birth of Chakravartin. He said that what is worthwhile, or the worthwhile place of taking rebirth, is as a man and not as a woman. And the reason is that it is because the wisdom is not of the great freedom. Therefore, at the time of taking various kinds of rebirth, he then come to the then he perceived with his direct perception, saying that what is worthwhile place of taking rebirth, or the body of taking rebirth, is as a man and not as a woman. Buddha is the only one who knows what is worthwhile and what is not. What is agreeable product and what is disagreeable product. So the agreeable and disagreeable can be perceived by the Buddha only. In fact, all the other Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, and all the great sages and the Bodhisattvas and so on and so forth, that they only know a partial aspect of what is agreeable and disagreeable. But the Buddha knows the whole aspect of them. For example, through generosity, we will receive wealth. That's the fruition. The fruition of being generous is wealth, and that is agreeable. But in the world, if things, for example, if you're not being generous and want to acquire wealth, that is disagreeable. There's no such fruition that would be associated with such kind of cause. The appropriate fruition associated with this cause is wrong. Therefore, it is a disagreeable product. It is not worthwhile. All the kinds of causes and fruitions, whatever fruition, whatever power of fruition is inherently within the cause. In fact, such kind of rules or such kind of nature, such kind of karma, such kind of nature of reasons and fruitions, or the causes and fruitions, can be known by the Buddha only. If you were to plant the seed of virtue, then you will reap the seed of happiness. that is agreeable product. And if you were to sow the seed of vice and wanting to reap the fruition of happiness, that is considered as a disagreeable product. It is to say that what is agreeable is that if you were to sow the seed of barley, then you will reap barley. But if you were to seed some other seeds and wanting to reap barley, that is disagreeable.
实际上我们可以还可以这么讲呢，就是比如说这个从这个是刚才因果方面讲的。
This is from the aspect of cause and fruition, and from the aspect of nature. For example, the nature, the nature of water is the nature of water, if we were to consider it as hot and consider the nature of fire as cold and consider the nature of earth as being wavering and considering the nature of wind being solid, those are considered as disagreeable, and vice versa. If we were to associate the nature of water being moist and cold and cooling, and consider the nature of fire being hot, nature of earth being solid, and the wind of being wavering, then that is agreeable. All kinds of academias and scholars and scientists, after their research and study, they would come to certain conclusions of it. But all of those kinds of conclusions, in fact, have already been taught by the Buddha. In various sutras and shastras, the Buddha has already proclaimed what is agreeable and what is not. Whatever we can't see, can't hear, can't touch, in fact, we do not understand how causes and fruitions could be linked together because there are the connections between them that we cannot hear, touch, and see. Some of those teachings that I've given, those are taught in according to the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra. And whenever you have an opportunity, I strongly encourage you to look into it. Whenever we engage in study of the 10 powers, first of all, we need to know how to expound it in the modern language in terms of what is worthwhile, what is worthless, and what is agreeable product and what is disagreeable product. There are various and manifold of the meanings. And I hope all of you could look into the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra. In fact, the teachings within that Shastra is very extensive. I originally wanted to translate that into Tibetan language, but I've already engaged in so many tasks, and I don't really have that much time, so I would take up the book and read it and then put it on the side and then have a few tries to make the aspiration of translating it, but I haven't really made up my mind yet. However, I do think the teachings within the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra is of great profundity and of great importance. On one hand, you need to come to the realization and the view of certainty that the Buddha is of great. The Buddha has such a great quality that is incomparable, and that's one of the outcome of studying this. The second aspect then started talking about the various kinds of causes and fruitions, because the Buddha had deeply trusted karma, the rule of cause and fruition. And he knows that the direct fruition, the product of the direct cause, for example, the unvirtuous would lead to the fruition of not wanted, and virtue would lead to the fruition of happiness. Because of such cause of trusting the rule of cause and fruition, he knows what kind of virtuous deeds need to be sold so that one could reap the virtuous fruition and vice versa. And he's very clear about all of that. And he could perceive that without any obstruction. To ordinary beings, in fact, we do not see the causes of the others, and we do not see the kind of previous karma of the others. For example, we only see the present situation they're in. There are people whom enjoy great happiness in this lifetime, and there are people whom only encounters obstacles in this lifetime. According to Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, where it says that in fact, there are people's virtuous deeds have matured in this lifetime, and we can see that. And the vice deeds have not matured yet, but will be. There are people whom practice a great deal of virtue, but it seems that in this lifetime they are enduring lots of suffering. That is because the virtuous seeds have not come to fruition yet. And there are people whom practice lots of virtue. Not only they do not enjoy the happiness or virtuous fruition, they in fact encounter lots of obstacles and lots of difficulties and adversities. And they would question, why do I, after practicing such great deal of virtuous deeds, but still reap the fruition, but seems that I still reap the fruition of suffering? In fact, it is just that they are not ripened yet. The virtuous deeds have not ripened, but the vice deeds, the fruition have already came to a fruition. The other day, I met an old woman who came to me, and she told me that her daughter climbed to the tree to rescue a kitten. And then after rescue the kitten, or at least try to rescue the kitten, she tried to catch the kitten and then let go of the branch at the same time, and it fell off the tree. Both of them fell off the tree, and the kitten was rescued, but she fell off the tree and she is still hospitalized. I'm not sure how she is right now, but she completely passed out at that time. We can see that after engaging in such a virtuous deeds, it seems that the fruition is the complete opposite. But that is because the virtuous seeds have not come to its fruition, but some vice deeds, the vice fruition had came to fruition. In our lifetime, there are people engaged in various virtuous deeds, but at the time of death, it seems that they suffer with great pain and had lots of adversity. However, do not lose faith. You should rather generate great faith to the rule of cause and fruition. There are people whom seek for favorable conditions after supplicating the protectors. And if it does happen that way, they will be happy. But if it doesn't, some people would lose faith. But it's not necessary, because sometimes it is because of your previous vice fruition had already came to fruition, then there's really nothing the protectors can do about that. Whenever you go to a hospital, you can see that lots of people suffer from illness, and at the time of death, there are people had to go through all of those all kinds of medical procedures, which could be very painful to their physical body, and then they would generate a great anger and aggression. There was once that a person at a time of death, something dropped on his face, and at the time of death, in fact, that's when the four great elements are disseminating, and lots of suffering are experienced. Pain and suffering are experienced by the deceased one. So the person at the time being hit on the face with a fan or some object, he generated great anger, and because of that anger, he fell into the three lower realms. There's also another person who heard the monks telling them that if you were to chant the Buddha's name for 10 times before the time of death, then you won't be reborn in lower realms. After conducting lots of vice deeds, he chanted he chanted the Buddha's names for 10 times before the time of death. He was reborn in higher realms. So there are all kinds of situations when it comes to the causes and fruitions and the time of maturation of the fruition. As mundane beings, we tend to be quite befuddled about what kind of fruition you may reap because of the cause, the seed of cause. But the Buddha can perceive all of them without any obstacles. He would be able to perceive that, oh, this being was a yak in the previous lifetime. Oh, in fact, the arhats or the arhats could be able to see that maybe this person, especially the ones with clairvoyance and knowing the past life, they can even see, oh, this person was a yak in the previous life, but they don't know what had happened in the life even before that. They do not have the panoramic picture of the previous lifetimes of that person. There are people with the miraculous powers and clairvoyance of knowing the previous lives, but they do not know all of the previous lives. They do not have such kind of omniscience of the previous lives.
In fact, sometimes I do worry about the time of death for many
people because lots of the times people have to go through the EMS, the emergency procedures before death, and the hospital and the doctors would perform CPRs. And with various kinds of mechanical and electrical treatments that could generate lots of anger and aggression from people, and that is really not beneficial for people at the time of death. That could lead to the rebirth of lower realms. So maybe as a practitioner, you can check out of the hospital. Well, that was the part on the fruition that is in accordance to the cause. And now we are going to look at the various types of faculties. Because the Buddha had observed the faculties of the sentient beings, the beings' faculties of being sharp and of the middle faculty or the sharp faculty, there are in fact 5 types of faculties: the faculty of faith, of diligence, of meditation, of right mindfulness. So those are the 5 types of faculties. But it is only the Buddha. In fact, the Buddha can use his wisdom to perceive the various kinds of faculties. Now we're talking about the 3rd quality, which is knowing the kinds of qualities of the sentient beings. In fact, we talked about the 5 faculties, and the sentient beings have various kinds of faculties and different faith. And there are people have different levels of faculties and faith. And there are the ones with rather very sharp faculty, but do not have a sufficient amount of faith. And there are the ones with great faith, but do not have a sufficient faculty. And there are the ones with great power of meditation, but not very much in terms of their diligence, and vice versa. So there are different beings with different faculties and with different situations. There are people with all the favorable aspects of such as a faculty, such as the faculty of faith, the faculty of the diligence, and so on and so forth. So we can see that the beings are of different faculties. And there are the various categories of faculties. There are people with there's the ones with the faculty with and without obstacles, such as the various disciples of the Buddha, Ananda, and so on and so forth. And those faculty and people with the various faculties should be taught differently as well. The ones with the dull faculty should be taught sometimes with rather sharp words or sharp instructions, with scolding and with coarse language, and sometimes has to be taught with gentle language and gentle words. And the Buddha, the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas only could perceive a part of it, but not the whole picture. Only the Buddha knows all the different aspects of the sentient being's faculties. For example, sometimes the sentient being's faculty is of sharp when it comes to the faith, and sometimes not. In fact, there are different combinations, different categories of faculties. The faculty of faith and the faculty of wisdom, faculties of meditation, faculties of diligence. In fact, there are the various categories. And whenever we look into ourselves and talking about the different variations of faculties, are you or do you have all of them? Do you have all of the sharp faculties in terms of all the different categories? We have to, in fact, it is difficult for all of us to see that. The 4th one is that because of complying with the beings'
了知这个众生，或者是随顺众生的这种戒性啊，就是戒性。因
and
为这样的
comply
原因呢，就
with
是众生
their
呢，就是
temperaments.
暂时就是不同的这个安住在这个三种根基、三种重心当中的话，
And understand
它
that
就
the
完全
sentient
这
beings
个
temporarily
刚才是那个
abide
是什么呢？
in
刚才是
the
根，那么
temperaments of
这
the
里呢，
three
重心，对
yanas,
不对？因为众生
in
的种类
various temperaments.
其实刚才这个根呢，就是也有这个意思，但是这个种类跟根呢还是有一点
So
差别的。
previously,
按照俱舍论的
faculty has
说法，大家也应该
certain
知道。 那这里
similarities
的
to the
这个戒性
temperament,
是
but
什么意思
temperament
的
is
话
still
呢？
a bit
实际上
different.
有些
So
是这
how
个
can
生
we
命中
understand
心的，
temperament?
有些是
Some
缘觉
people
中
have
心
the
的，有
temperament
些
of
是这
being
个
a
菩萨中
Shravaka,
心的，
some being
有
a
些是我们这
Pratika,
个实践
Pratika
当中
Buddha,
的
some
话呢，
of
就是理解
a
中心的，有些
Bodhisattva,
是色界
and
中心的，有些是无
beings
色界
in
中
our
心的。
realm can be
然后我
considered
们这
as
个
the
理解
beings
众生
with
的
the
当中的话
temperament
呢，
of
就是也是这个各
being
种
the
中心的
being
是
of
不同的，包括我们人类当中的
desire
话
in
呢，
this
这个
desire realm,
东方
and
的这些中心的和
people
西方的
with
中心的人呢，
people,
也
for
是不
example,
同
within
的。
this
所以
world,
说
there are
在这个
beings
时候
of
呢，
the
就
temperament
应该
of
知道就是众生的
the
这个根
Easterner
基
and
呢，
some
就
of
是
the
也是
Westerners.
确实
So
也是
we
不
can
同
say
的，
that
就
there
是
are
它的
the
这个
various
戒性
temperaments
不
of
同
the
的，戒
sentient
性不同
beings.
的话呢，也就是说，就是有些众生呢，就是他可以呢，很快的时间当中可以
Some
度化的，
beings
有些众
can
生呢，就
be
是就可能
liberated
就是
and
以后
crossed
可以度化
over within a
有些
short
众
period
生
of
的话
time.
呢，就
There are
是
beings that can
他
be
就
crossed
依靠
over
于
in
一
the
种
later period
比
of
较
time, and
艰
there are
难
the
的方法来
beings
可以度化的，等等，就
can
是
be
每个众
liberated
生呢，
in
就
a
是
very
有些
swift
是
and
可能以
quick
赞叹的语言来
method.
度化，有些众生
There
是
are
以这
beings
个
can
挫折
be
的语言来度化，
liberated
凡是
through
有
a
各种不同
gentle
的这
and
种戒
praising
性，
language, and
所
there
以
are
这个
beings
呢，
that can be
就是叫做
liberated
是
through
知道这个中
the
有戒
coarse
性不同
language
的这
or
个
the
智
kind
慧，
of
就是佛陀有这样的。我们
scolding
其他人的话呢，包
words.
括我们这个比较著名的这些老师的话呢，其实这些老师也是不知道就是
Whenever
每
we
一个
look
学
at
生的这个
teachers,
根基啊，他只不过是
even
他
if
知
they're
道是
very
这个
famous
学
and
生的这
well-known
个智力
teachers,
怎么样，他的这个道德行为是
they
怎么
may
样，
be able
这
to
个不一定
observe
能
their
能知道的啊，
students'
就包括我们有些
faculty
法
or
师的话呢，
temperaments
就
of
是也是
being
自己就
with
装的
knowledge
就
or
是知
being
道，就是
smart
还
or
有一些
not.
就是说这
They
个前世啊、后
sometimes
世
would
啊，
be
就
able
是这
to
样。
see
那
that,
这
but
样的话，
in
我
fact, they
们专
don't
门就是
know
靠
the
看那个，我
past
听说
lives
是有一些
and
是
don't
神
know
通的，
their
就是如果
deep
有的话，
temperaments
那
and
就是那是
and
声
so
闻的
on.
这个神
I've
通呢，
heard
是阿罗
that
汉的神
there
通呢，
are
还是
Dharma
这个佛
masters
的这个
who
神
would
通呢？就是
proclaim
这
that
个
they
也要
know
去
their
去观
disciples'
察的啊，就是
past
以前
lives
世是
and
做什么这个
temperaments.
王子的，就是什
Well,
么
if they
这
think they
个
have such kind of
这个
clairvoyance and such kind of
这个
miraculous
那个时候
powers, then
我是什
maybe
么什么，你
we
是什么
can
什么。
test
如
them
果真的
and
知道的话，我们这
see
个学院当中
if
应该不会有的。如果有的话，那就是
if they
确实
have the
要
kind of
大
miraculous
家要注
power
意，
of
不
the
然的
level
话
of a
就是如果
Shravaka
你做这个大
or
王语
someone
那
else.
大王语的话呢，基本的一个出家人的这个身份就没有了，更何况说这个其他的了啊，就这个是就是如果真正就是了知众生的这个
I
戒心
believe
的话
that
呢，
in
很
Larungar we
难
don't
的。
have
所以有
such
些
kind
法师
of
们呢，就是
situation,
讲
or
说
at
话的
least
时候呢，
many
就是应该
very
就是按
little.
照说法，就是不要就是就自己就是确实要这个有社会
But
这个
I think that
森
to
森
the
道道
ones
的，
who
就是
do
这
have
个
such
是
kind of
就这样
problems
的话，
or
可
do
能
have
造成
such
的
kind
不
of
一定大家都认为
proclamations,
是你
it
是
would
很
be the
了不
best
起的
not
啊，
to
就
do
是
that.
如果你真正
It
有这
would
样的这
be
种特异功能也好，或者说是你有神通也好，你有这种
If you
这个
do have
佛
such
陀的
kind of
势力的
miraculous
这种
power,
智
if you
慧，
do
或者没
have
有佛陀的势力，
the
跟势力比较相
powers
似的啊，你是
that
这
is
个上
similar
根
to the
基的，
10
你是
powers
阿罗汉
of
根基
the
的，那这样
Buddha,
的话倒是
if
可
you
以
have
但是这
something
个确实
that's
很难
similar
的
to
啊，因为我
Shravakas,
的
to
就
Arhats,
不知道，就
if
有
you
时候
have such
看这个
kind
人的
of
这种行为
faculty
呢，
and such
就
kind
会
of
不会这个
miraculous powers,
比如
then
说
maybe
听
you
个
could
密
do
法，
that.
就是可能画
But
画
for
有
me,
变化，就是有
myself,
这样的。所以我们一般就是对每个人呢，就单独给你讲一个窍诀，就是没有这样的这个能力啊，就没，但是也不需要这样的能力，就是一般来讲，
though
佛
I
陀
do
这个
give
转法论的
the
时候呢，也是
teachings
并没有就是他对每一个人都
Vajrayana,
是
however,
讲
I
一
do
个
not
法则，
give
并没有这
the
样的。我们
teachings
以
to
前上次注意到
individuals.
的
I
话
do
呢，
not have
也
such
是跟
kind
大
of
家说话的时候，
I
顺
do
着
not
大
have
家的
such
这
kind
个
of
法则
ability
讲，
to
讲的
see
过
the various different faculties of the others. This is only this is
内容呢，就是对他有利的。就像我们今天这个讲的10种智力的话呢，有些是第一智力。
This particular extensive power is acquired by the Buddha. There are, for example, the audience within our audience. There are the audience of different temperaments. There are the beings. There are audience within our crowd whom may feel good about certain aspects of the teachings only. And then, however, people would come to me to ask me, could you please give me a sacred peace instruction? But I don't think it's really necessary. With faith and with your own temperament, you will be able to receive the various peace instructions throughout the teachings. The Buddha, in fact, during his teaching, he gave the teachings within large assemblies, sometimes thousands and tens of thousands of various beings, and he knows the temperaments of all the disciples within the assembly, and then he would say that who can receive the first fruition, second fruition, and so on. And he knows the numbers of people, disciples to receive such fruition. And the fifth one says that because the Buddha had complied with the various wishes and aspirations of sentient beings, the various aspirations, for example, there are beings with the aspiration of Theravada, the beings with the kind of aspiration towards the Mahayana, and so on and so forth. So the Buddha complied with the various aspirations of the sentient beings. For example, Devadatta, whom enjoyed great fame at the time, and Shunanda, whom enjoyed great various types of desire and enjoyments. Ananda, who enjoyed the various knowledge, and Rahula enjoyed. What did he enjoy? Precepts?
对，迷信就是感兴趣的，就是所以他每个人呢，就是对这个有些是对禅定很感兴趣的，有些是对那个智慧很感兴趣的。
Some are interested in meditation, some in wisdom, some in debate.
喜欢就包括我们吃的话呢，有些是喜欢吃辣的，有些是喜欢吃
Even
酸的。
when it comes to our preference of flavor, some people prefer spicy and sour, and some prefer all of those flavors combined.
有各种各样的吧，对吧？就是这也是
People enjoy different flavors. Similarly, that can be.
不对应的。 如果你不对应、不相应的话
That kind of preferences can be also used to understand aspiration.
叫错了，就是叫错了，修了很长时间，就是去修这个不净观和呼吸观的话，
People enjoy the meditation.
他稍微调个个儿，然后这样修的时候，马上得这个成就了。
And there are disciples whom engaged in the meditation of contemplating on the impure, and some in the other way around. And then the Buddha noticed how their particular method of meditation is not really in accordance to their aspiration. Therefore, that has to be that particular type of meditation needs to be changed. So the Buddha knows all of those aspirations and the preference in according to the various disciples' faculties and temperaments. So the Buddha then would teach accordingly. That is why sometimes I tell the Dharma teachers to teach the variety of the methods of meditation as well.
一样，就是他就马上呢，就是知道是哪些是对他有利的，哪些是对他没有利的。
When the Buddha observed the various aspirations of of the disciples, he knows what would be the most helpful and beneficial to them, and he can teach accordingly. That's the fifth one. And the fifth one is the wishes and aspiration. And sixth one is that because the Buddha had practiced upon all the yanas and had already understood the path reaching to the entire range, and he knows all the various realms, that is, for example, the human realm, ghost realm, and so on and so forth. He knows all the various realms. We do not know the realm that we will be reborn in, and we do not know all the realms either. So that's how the Buddha is very different. The Buddha knows all the realms and know the path and realms to its entire range. And the seventh one is knowing meditative stability and so on. It is because he had encouraged as well as he had diligently practiced the innumerable numbers of meditation, and various kinds of samadhi was gained through the defiled and undefiled samadhi, the kind of defiled samadhi such as the ones in the ones that would lead to be reborn in the celestial realm and in the formless realm and so on and so forth, as well as the supreme undefiled samadhi. So the Buddha then knows completely about all the Podagalas samadhi, such as the shamatha and the meditation of formless and liberation, as well as the pure samadhi and the impure and defiled samadhi, the pure samadhi, the four levels of meditation, and the various dhyana in accordance to the various various levels of practice. I think nowadays in the West, because people have such kind of preference to meditation, if you were to give teachings on samadhi, on meditation, they would enjoy it. And if you were to tell them to meditate, they would enjoy it, and they would feel that meditation is no other than do not think of nothing. They can then abide in their thought, in the kind of thoughtlessness, and then they would feel it's very comfortable. They feel that if they don't think of anything, and they can temporarily get rid of all the troublesome thoughts, that is considered as samadhi already. But in fact, I noticed that some of our Sangha members, they would also engage in various meditations. They would get up in the morning and practice meditation for some time, and then in the evening as well. In fact, this kind of habit is very helpful to the practitioners or anyone to release stress, as well as developing all kinds of insights, spiritual insights. What would be really great is that if the wind can enter into the central channel, and if you can completely extinguish all the dualistic thoughts, and all of these kinds of spiritual experiences would be great, of course. But even any other types of meditation are also great. So over here it says that the Buddha had then attained this undefiled power of wisdom because of his practice of immeasurable numbers of samadhi. And the eighth one is because the Buddha had protected the virtue of self and other without frivolousness. Therefore, the Buddha knows all the kinds of actions and the causes of the previous life, let it be the ones for himself and for the others. In fact, this is the power of knowing the past states. The Shravakas, in some ways, they also can see some parts of it. The Shravakas can only see a very little aspect of it. They cannot see the whole aspect of the past states. There was an old man who wanted to get ordained, if you remember from the sutra, but the Shravakas, after observing with their clairvoyance, they do not see any past life virtues. But the Buddha saw that in far past, this particular old man had chanted Namo Buddhaya, and because of such kind of virtue, he does have this virtuous root to be ordained. Mingyur Dorje, he knows about 220 past lifetimes. I translated a little a portion of it, of the records of his past 200 lifetimes. I was translating it, and then I couldn't find the Tibetan text, and I couldn't find the Chinese translation that I've done so far either. At that time, I felt it was really interesting. And I went through lots of my things at that time, and I couldn't find those two texts anymore. Sometimes the great masters, those lofty masters, they definitely know and understand the past lives that they've had. In Phuntsog Rinpoche's biography, at many places he mentioned about his past lifetimes. And then the ninth one talks about the divine sight. Why the Buddha has divine sight? It is because in the stage, at the causal stage, he did not cause any of the sentient beings to generate fear. Rather, he was their guidance, he was their tutor and guide, and give the teachings of the Dharma according to the truth. Also, with the unobstructed clairvoyance and miraculous power, he then understood all the coming and going, as well as the various migration of life of the sentient beings. There are beings with miraculous powers. They can only know about the transmigration of the sentient beings' lives within a 3,000-fold world, the small sphere of the 3,000-fold world, but they do not know all of them. But the Buddha does. The Buddha knows the transmigration of the lives of all sentient beings, of all the 3,000, of all the large sphere of the 3,000-fold world. So this is the ninth power, that is divine sight. And the 10th power is the power of peace. Some, according to some, this one, the power of peace, can also be explained as the power of exhaustion of defilement. So in the previous, the Buddha had given the teachings to the sentient beings because because he knows how to exhaust all the defilements, and with the unobstructed miraculous power, he had extinguished the affliction as well as all the defilements of self and other. So this is the power of this is the power of peace or exhaustion of defilement. Such kind of powers, because the Buddha had complied the sentient beings, he had already subdued all the counterparts that are the four maras. Now let's continue with the one last verse. Knowing the worthwhile and worthless, complete ripening, the various temperaments, path, and aspiration of beings. Over here, the Buddha talks about the cause and results. The Buddha knows, in fact, all the appropriate causes and the agreeable product, that is the fruition, and knowing them, what is worthwhile and worthless, respectively. And then the next one talks about knowing the action and its complete ripening are done and must be harvested by oneself, knowing the various temperaments or dispositions of the disciples. And the various faculties. And knowing the various aspirations as well as the manifold faculties of disciples, as well as the particular differences and the particularity of meditation of the sentient beings, knowing the previous states of existence of sentient beings with the power of clairvoyance, and knowing birth and the transmigration of death and means of the divine vision, and knowing the way in which all pollutions of oneself and other sentient beings is exhausted. So over here it talks about the 10 types of powers, and now let's look at the function. Over here it talks about the function. The first 6 has the power of penetrating. As mundane beings, we do not. As mundane beings, we are of great ignorance, and we do not see the causes and fruitions. So the Buddha, however, knowing or have such kind of wisdom that can penetrate ignorance, uproot ignorance. Therefore, there are the three similes or 3 ways of explaining the 3 aspects that can be understood in correspondence to all the 10 powers, and how these 10 powers can penetrate the various ignorance and various obstacles of the sentient beings. The first 6 powers are like the are like the Vajra that can are like the armor. So all the way from knowing what is worthwhile, not not worth. Knowing what is worthwhile and worthless. This is first one. Second one is the ripening product of actions, and third one is knowing faculties. Fourth one, temperament, and sixth wishes, and fifth is wishes, and sixth is knowing the various transmigrations. So those are the 6 powers. It is the first 6 are like that the sentient beings has such kind of ignorance that's just like a very solid armor, but such kind of solid armor refers to the cognitive obscuration, and such kind of armor-like obscuration of cognition can be destructed by a Vajra. Therefore, the first 6 powers refer to the Vajra. And then the 3 in the middle, where we talk about the 7th one, which is the meditative stability and knowing the past state, as well as the divine sight, those have the quality of piercing that could destroy the obscuration of meditation. So the 3 powers of the 7th, 8th, and 9th powers can pierce through the obscuration of meditation like a Vajra. And the 10th one, the power of peace, can destroy all the obscuration of afflictions. That's like trees or forests of afflictions. With the wisdom of the Buddha, he can destroy the forest of afflictions. So over here it refers to the obscuration of affliction of the sentient beings. And the Buddha has such a kind of power of wisdom that's just like a Vajra. These 3 aspects of simile all points to the power of Vajra that can destroy all the obstacles and pierce through all kinds of the 3 obstacles. In fact, the first one is obstacle of cognition, and second one obstacle of meditation, and third one is obstacle of afflictions. So those are the 3 aspects of obscurations and how it's corresponded to each of them. Today, I think the class may sound a little too academic and a little bit dry, but this is how Maitreya Bodhisattva taught the Uttaratantra Shastra. I think this time I'm giving the teachings in a rather simple way, and if you don't understand it, you can complain it to Maitreya Bodhisattva. There's really nothing I can do. I really tried my best to give you these teachings in a simple language, and today we've studied the 10 powers of the Buddha. And after this class, you should know what the 10 powers are. And if you were to write an essay upon the 10 powers, if you were to give teachings and give a speech upon the 10 powers, and give, for example, a presentation in a university, I think all of those kinds of activities would be very necessary. We have to look into the various aspects of the 10 powers, and we have to explore its profundity. Otherwise, we will only stay on the level of words, and that is just too shallow. And you yourself won't be benefited from the studying of the 10 powers. You have to engage all of those into your contemplation and practice. Otherwise, by listening to it, you're only planting a seed of virtue of listening to the Dharma, but not planting it into your. You're not really planting a seed of profound liberation yet. So, after listening to such profound teaching on the 10 powers of the Buddha, I think we're very fortunate. Myself, I consider myself as extremely fortunate to be able to give the teaching and studying the 10 powers every day and giving the teachings every day and today on the 10 powers, and every day I get to chant the aspiration of Samattabhadra. And all of those are of great importance and a great fortune. Now we have such opportunity. We need to cherish it. And whenever you lose this opportunity, you may feel that you may feel great regret, or you may feel that it was really wonderful that I spent the time to do so back then, but now I don't have that opportunity. So now we have this opportunity still. Let's cherish it. It's really important to cherish whatever opportunity we still have. Now, since we still have the time and opportunity and all the favorable conditions, we listen to the Mahayana teaching like this all together. We chant the aspiration of Samattabhadra. Let's chant and dedicate our merit in such kind of cherishing mind. Chubum tsune zhuwa zhuwa shung